It's quite extraordinary to see the way that the polls have turned, because only months ago it really was the Conservatives' election to lose. The expectation was that Pierre Poilievre was going to bring his party to victory and that there was no way that the Liberals could turn things around in such a short time frame. But two things seem to have happened. One is that Mark Carney, having taken over as Prime Minister and Liberal leader, has sought to jettison some of the policies of Justin Trudeau, and to do that quite deliberately. And with his experience, obviously, at Goldman Sachs and at central banks, he's seen as a pretty steady hand on the economic tiller at a difficult time, and someone who might be able to help navigate some of the difficult moments that we're in. And also you have the question of the Trump effect, which is that Donald Trump, very aggressively going for Canada on trade, just over the border on migration as well. And certainly you could say fundamentally upending the relationship between the US and Canada. And that's really played into the election campaign. You can see that in the polling, that the number one issue most Canadian voters say that they're focusing on in the short term is, the US relationship.
But isn't the fact that Trump threat is overshadowing a productivity crisis that both of the leaders don't have much room to fix fiscally?
Well, that's right. And the economy is in a very difficult spot in Canada, and could become even more so, because while Canada has some cars, because it's a big exporter to the US of products the US needs, it's also really the kind of sole market for a lot of Canadian products, and so only set to become even more complicated. And so the economic picture is very difficult. The question is, do voters in the minute when they stand there to cast their ballot today say, I'm going to vote on sort of an emotional level really about the US relationship, or I'm going to vote on those underlying long-term structural economic issues, including housing as well, which is a big one for a lot of people in Canada, and who's best placed to fix all of that. The Conservatives have campaigned on the idea also that Mark Carney, while he has moved to separate himself from Justin Trudeau, is still really sort of Trudeau in Carney clothing, in a way that he's not fundamentally that different, and that his economic policies would echo Justin Trudeau. And of course, Trudeau's economic policies were not particularly popular at the time that he stepped aside.
The polls have, as you've mentioned, shifted in favour of the Liberal Party. Where might we be looking for surprises as we see the results come in later?
Well, it's interesting because the very last poll that we've seen has shown a little bit of slippage again for Carney. And the question is, does he get enough of the seats to form a government in his own right? Or are we headed potentially for another minority government in Canada? I mean, the strongholds traditionally for the Liberals, Quebec, Ontario, seem to be where they are going into the vote. The question, in a way, is also about Western Canada, which is the traditional stronghold for the Conservatives. And do you see some fundamental shifts in voting patterns there? So do you see a total polarisation, or do you see some voters moving across the aisle? And does that mean a minority government or a majority one?
And how do you stand up to Trump if you're just a minority government?
Well, that's the key question again. I mean, Mark Carney obviously is seen as someone who has got lots of experience with, running central banks and Goldman Sachs, and so understands a lot of the economic rationale and can possibly talk to Donald Trump in a way that Donald Trump can resonate with. But again, he is seen as someone who's very much coming from the Trudeau-esque camp. And we all know how Donald Trump feels about Justin Trudeau. They did not get on at all. And, he probably sees Carney as being cast a bit from the same cloth. So very difficult times ahead for whoever wins this election.